We've spoken before about creating space and mindfulness, and in fact, it's constantly coming up in our discussions. It was, I think, our New Year's resolution for everybody, to the extent we were getting on the New Year's resolution bandwagon. But we've had a lot of questions about, practically speaking, how to create that space, how to be mindful. And I think we've given some ideas, but this week we wanted to issue the Trueable 24-hour challenge. And we would advise that you go 24 hours without using electronic devices. So no phone, no laptop, no video games, no TV, nothing that would distract you. And that's really what we've been talking about also in the past, the ability for ourselves to distract ourselves from our lives. And that's a constant refrain that we see. We're either busy, engaged in all the different activities, work, family, whatever we have going on, or else we're filling space constantly. That instinct to look at our phone, that instinct to quickly, search for things. It's almost like it's part of ourselves. And that really creates a huge disconnect and a huge inability to be mindful. So as a practical matter, we would say, try going 24 hours and not having these distractions that are eating up all our mindfulness. So
it's a healthy challenge.
I say that again?
I said it's a healthy challenge.
You've spoken many times about being mindful in the moment, just walking and being not really having a mindfulness practice so much. I tend to have much more of a practice associated with it. So before I was going to start mentioning some things that come up to the surface when you don't let yourself be distracted, but I guess contrast it with your approach to mindfulness.
Well, I think the approach of it really relies on a lot more self-awareness, I guess. Not relies on more than maybe what you're suggesting. I think where I am in my practice and how it can be more moment to moment is by taking technology breaks, by even able to differentiate what is distraction and what is presence. You can cultivate a more constant self-awareness of when you are distracting yourself, or the term I use a lot is numbing your senses. And that's what we do a lot of times with electronics and with a lot of the things that inundate us throughout the day with technology. So, when I talk about taking a walk or being able to know what it means to curate a moment in my day where I'm unplugged, even if it's just momentarily on a walk, or taking a break from some time where I could have passive music in the background, or just being somewhere where I could be on my phone and I choose consciously not to be and just breathe, or just sit there and just feel the air on my skin and try to smell what's going on in the room. Those are mini practices. Those are moments where I'm cultivating my body senses and I'm activating things that are beyond my eyes and my intellect, and trying to understand that I'm rooted in this physical reality. And you can remind yourself of that in a single breath. You can remind yourself of that in a moment. You can remind yourself when you just pause during dinner and don't talk and just taste the food in your mouth, like roll it around on your tongue and understand what's going on in your body when the flavors are actually chemically, moving through you. And what does that mean to taste, to smell, to enjoy something? So that's sort of the more constant practice I'm talking about. And again, in order to engage in that, you have to understand when you aren't doing that. And I think that's what the technology cessation, and that's what, if you've gotten to a point where you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'm not really sure, I'm just living my life, I don't feel like I'm numbing out, or what am I distracting myself with? That's where I think this would be difficult to contemplate. And I think by making hard breaks in the beginning, because I've done that, I've gone on technology fasts and I've gone on actual fasts, I've gone more than 24 hours. I mean, when you start to separate yourself from the things that are constantly inundating your senses, you can start to categorize and have more awareness, not to start repeating myself. Does that help?
It does. I think if you've never really experienced that tension, it is a tension of transitioning from distraction to being present with yourself. I think it's like never having felt a baseball, connecting, exactly with a baseball. If you don't have that that sensory awareness and feeling, it does help to have some process to get you there. And once you've experienced that, and that struggle against it, I think then you can be more mindful in easier ways in the future. But I do think having like a technology fast or something along those lines does help get you there easier in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why the term practice, it has that implication that you're practicing something so you can learn a new skill or that you can strengthen a muscle. It's the same thing here. And it's a common theme in our conversations about just like a lot of things. If you don't have the awareness, if you don't have the pattern recognition, it's something that needs to be practiced so you identify it for sure. But I would ask you, you started with that word distraction, and your definition for those who are just getting started, what are they being distracted from? What is the alternate state? If you're saying that technology is a distraction, what, I guess, define that a little bit more.
So a distraction is anything that's keeping you from being in touch with yourself. So I don't know if that's probably not even getting close enough to it. But for each person, I think it's a little bit different. But I think if you don't allow yourself the outputs or the outlets that you normally have, such as technology, I think then you'll realize what it is for yourself. So I don't know I don't know how you would define it, Sam.
That's about how I define it. I just wanted to see what your thinking was on it. I think that's right. I mean, an analogy that I would use is, have you ever cut yourself a small cut or bumped yourself or nicked yourself throughout the day, but you've been so busy you didn't realize it until maybe that evening, or you look down and there's a little dried blood somewhere, something shallow. It's that kind of distraction. If you had been sitting in a quiet place after you inflicted a minor wound on yourself, you might have felt like the slight swelling under the skin, or you might have felt the trickle of blood, wherever around the wound, but you were distracted. So that distraction of maybe going around your errands, going about your day, maybe you had meetings, it actually prevents you from getting some of the data that's coming from your body passively all the time, because we've gotten used to not having to listen that closely because we've got other things that our mind's engaged in. So that's a physical example, but I hope it illustrates the distraction we're talking about. Because in further application of this, Jonathan is alluding to this connection with the body or the self. Your body gives you a ton of information throughout the day. That's why I was saying too, there's examples of, feeling sensations that you normally don't have to pay attention to, smells, sounds, sights, that are kind of beyond your intellectual direct attention. Your body's collecting data all day long. And also there's things going on inside your body, tons of things. In fact, actually, scientifically, trillions of transactions per second are happening inside your body at various levels and scales and magnitudes. And those things, when something's going wrong with them, your body can tell you. You can actually feel them. You can have some passive awareness of them, but you have to be not distracted constantly so that data can get through to your attention, to your priority of your awareness, because we only have limited awareness at any given moment. So that hopefully that helps. That's a little bit more of a physical explanation of what we're talking about.
It's interesting. I have a physical one too that I found. If you ever try floating on your back in the ocean, most of the time there's this difficulty for people to just let go and let the body's naturally buoyant, but we're constantly moving and fighting it, and that feeling that you're going to sink down prevents you from actually floating. So I've seen a lot of people struggle with the ability to float on their back, and the way to float on your back is just to let it happen. And you can't have your mind keep telling you, no, I got to move, I got to fight it, I got to tread water, I have to do whatever it is that the instinct is telling you to do. You actually have to let your body just float. And I think that's the transition that's really, really hard for people. But if you don't allow yourself to get to distract your brain with technology and the like, I think you'll see a lot of patterns that you might have, like when you want to reach for that phone. It's almost like, even if you don't have the phone with you, like you'll see your hand will flip the way that it normally does in response to scenarios where you have a moment to yourself. So I think there is this instinct sometimes to not allow yourself to just sit with things and sit with your thoughts or feelings or even the physical feelings that you're having.
Yeah, it's certainly an instinct nowadays. I mean, the whole technology thing is like, you realize when you try this how addicted we really are. And I know that's kind of trite because we hear that in the public eye now all the time, but it really is startling if you actually try it, how much you have a phone or a computer in front of you or a video game or a television. It's really constant. I mean, even when television came out before the internet, they were having reports written that people were spending 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day in front of the television. It started way before technology and all the different types of content were as ubiquitous, and now it's even worse than ever. But it definitely it can fill every moment and every second of your waking life if you're not conscious of it.
You had mentioned the brain is constantly processing. They've done so many studies that if you're problem solving, especially a really complex problem, your subconscious continues working on it. But the more rest and relaxation you give your brain, the more that process is effective. The more you're bombarding your sights and sounds and all your senses with other information or distraction, the more it distracts from that process occurring.
Yeah,
So
and your body's your body's natural priorities, like you said, your brain is working on things and processing problems that you kind of consciously give it, but there's also tons of problems going on with your body that is coming through your mind that are not conscious, that are autonomous, and they're trying to tell you things. I have a lot of people in my life and my networks who struggle with depression. It seems more and more common, and one could say it's because it's more open and people are more open to talk about it, or there's a lot of reports that say it's becoming more prevalent. But one of the biggest things is they talk about how, well, if I'm not distracted, I have all these troubling thoughts that are constantly plaguing me. Well, and there's a lot of traditions of spiritual practice that talk about this, and they say that's because that's the conversation your body is having with you. Those are top of mind. Those troubling thoughts could be about your health, could be about something that's coming up through you, some trauma that you need to address, some level of psychological wound that is still present for you, and you need to talk about. So we're in a very much avoid pain type of phase in Western culture, where you can avoid all those troubling things by just numbing through television, through TikTok, through Instagram, through whatever it is. But that's what we're talking about. It's not a solution to solving those things. Those things coming up unbidden are your body talking to you. Those are the conversations that are priority. And the longer you ignore them, they will come more strongly. They'll come through your dreams. They'll come in every waking moment. They'll come when you're trying to go to bed. And there's an element of the thing that I hear people say the least is that's where being mindful helps you hone in on what those are and face them and have that conversation with yourself. If you're not willing to have it, or you're distracted constantly, it's just going to be burning in the background until it really gets you down in physical ways.
And there are scenarios, of course, where people need help and should get help. And it's not like if you're depressed, the simple solution is just be mindful. But there is a malaise that's out there, and a general sense, that I don't like how I feel right now, or something like that. And that is really where you need to be working through it. And that struggle against it, that instinct to run away from it and not sit with it, that is exactly what we're talking about. You really do need to sit with it. And it could be very uncomfortable, but it is far more fulfilling and far more rich when you do,
Yeah.
when you get past it.
Well, and if you are somebody who has a lot of problems, or like problems is a bit of a strong word, if you have a lot of duress or a lot of signals coming through your body into your passive thoughts, that's where a technology fast could actually be very intense for you as an individual. Like what Jonathan suggested, it's kind of a nice thought to say, oh, you can be more mindful and get more in touch. But if you do remove technology for 24 hours, you're going to notice how time dilates significantly, and the length of your day is going to extend very, very long compared to what you're used to, most likely. And there will be a lot of thoughts and conversations that if you just allow them to come in and you have that conversation with your body and yourself, it can be a challenging one. It can bring up a lot. Just keeping all that other noise from coming in on top of it can be very cathartic. People will report.
There are a lot of, I was saying that there are many scenarios where there's almost an instinct to do it. You might be in a relationship and, you're with the person and something just happened you didn't like. You can't really identify it, or you didn't really allow it to fully come into yourself. And the next thing you're on the phone, or, you're playing video games or something like that. So it's not necessarily that you need to resolve every point of tension in your life at all times, but if you distract yourself from it, it's not going away. It's not going to change. You're just going to be that much more time into the future that you're going to deal with that feeling. And that's not going to be easier. It's probably going to be a lot harder. So it is very, very important to be able to sit with things and see what comes up and just observe, see what your patterns are. But I would, again, strongly suggest that not having the electronic distraction is definitely a practice that you will get in touch with what mindfulness is.
Yeah. And you'll start to build that differentiation. It's that muscle, because you'll start to see that for some people, and maybe you and maybe not, electronics can fall in the same category of numbing that I was referring to earlier as alcohol, tobacco, self-harm in a variety of ways. It's really anything that drowns out your senses in a way that doesn't allow you to have the conversation we're saying will happen when you have more space. So for a lot of us, electronics is seemingly benign, and it can be. And also it's propelled us into this incredible technological age. So I don't want anyone to think on the line I'm inherently anti-technology, because that's not true.
We're definitely not Luddites.
Yeah, it's a marvelous thing. But with all marvelous things, there is a capacity to use it incorrectly or to overindulge. And that's, I think, really more of the heart of what we're talking about.
And there's this general idea of, well, not a general idea at all. If you're always on your phone or always engaged in video games or always doing something other than sitting with how you're feeling or being in touch with yourself, then you're just distracting yourself from life. Like you can live a whole life like that, between focusing on what you should be doing at work and then distracting yourself at all other times. You'll never really fully reveal yourself, even to yourself, and be able to be everything you can be. So at the end of the day, all the distraction in the world is not going to make life more fulfilling. That's for sure.
Typically does not. And I guess that's probably that's the thoughts, my thoughts on that topic. So I guess the challenge is issued, right? If anyone decides to take it, we'd love to hear your comments about it.
Exactly. We'd love to hear how it went, what this challenge was, if it was helpful, and we'll talk about it again. So with that, we'll sign off for episode 19.
Sayonara. Until next week.